doing this non-traditional, like making what we are. Almost
Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you. We got about 25 people here. The group is growing. I think it's great. I would encourage you to tell that your friends at work and at the soccer field and at church, if they're in IT leadership, I think they can benefit from the group. So please spread the word for us. We've got a pretty big mailing list now and quite a few followers on LinkedIn. So we're growing. We're quarterly right now, and I hope we move to bi-monthly next year, but we'll need a few more people showing up to move to bi-monthly. I think bi-monthly is a little bit better just for continuity's sake. Welcome. My name's Doug Thies. I'm the founder of IT Leaders. We run this in Indy. We run it in Louisville, and Northeast Indiana is our most recent startup, and this is our third meeting, so we're super glad to have you here. Who are we and why are we here? The meeting was designed initially for directors and managers in staff IT positions, IT people with direct reports who are working sometimes in a technology company, sometimes not, but often have more leadership challenges than they have technology challenges. Technology is often the easy part. Many of us have been promoted from individual contributors who are fabulous technologists to okay leaders. There's a variety of reasons for that, but it's not very common to get leadership training these days, and that's what we're focused on, is hearing other people's leadership journeys and maybe even some formal education as we move forward. We start at 8 o'clock. We go from 8 to 8:30, letting you have a little bit of breakfast and getting to know each other. And then we have a couple of guest speakers after my announcements here, so I hope you enjoy it. Bathrooms are down past the elevator. Breakfast and coffee is behind the screen here in the room behind us. I think most of you have found it. 10 a.m. is our scheduled finish time. Sometimes we finish early. We've got a unique situation today in that both speakers are going to be speaking together, so I think you'll enjoy that. If you want to keep track of what's going on with the group, there's a few different ways to do that. The easiest way is itleaders.org/NE Indiana. That is the site where you can sign up for the mailing list so you get emails notifying you. We send about 4 emails a session out to keep you informed of who's speaking and when the next event is. There is a LinkedIn company page also known as IT Leaders NE Indiana. And that link right there will get you to it. I would encourage you to follow that as well so you can see notices, and that will remind you just a little bit more often of what's coming on. There is also an IT Leaders community group that is spread across all 3 markets. So Northeast Indiana, Indy, and Louisville. This is a place where you can post questions. What tools are you using? Which vendors do you like? How are you dealing with a particular problem? We're looking for a person for a particular role. This is you communicating with each other in this private LinkedIn group. So the private group is called IT Leaders Community, and that's for you to communicate with each other. If you like this event and you like the idea of spreading the word and you're a social media type, please take some pictures of the speakers and of the group and post those. You're welcome to text your pictures to me so I can use them on the follow-ups for LinkedIn. The hashtag is ITLeadersNE Indiana, longest hashtag ever. And my mobile phone number is right here if you want to go ahead and text that. But do take some pictures. I think it's useful. IT people are often visual learners, so seeing the group I think makes it a little bit easier. If you would like to benefit even more than just showing up and hearing the speakers, I would encourage you to link up with me on LinkedIn. My name is Doug Thies, Theis. I will be reaching out to you to get a little bit of a feedback from you on the group and any topics that you'd like to cover. So schedule some time with me on a little bit of feedback. If you've got speakers that you've heard, one of your bosses or somebody that you think would be good for the group to talk about leadership, let me know about that in our feedback discussion. and then spread the word to your friends on this. We also publish podcasts and videos of the prior events on these. And I'm going to jump forward here for a second. YouTube.com/expedient/videos is where you can find those. That is end to end. That's what Eric is doing right back there. He is recording these sessions end to end, so you can, if you're not there or you want to share the content with a friend, that's an easy way for them to see what the meetings are like. And all three chapters videos are on that site. Also, we have, since the first of the year, been prying the audio out of those recordings and publishing those as an audio-only podcast. So if you are a podcast listener, you can subscribe to IT Leaders, that's the name of it. And this link right here will get you access from the podcast aggregator of your choice. You can grab this, and then typically, well, most of the podcast aggregators are linked into transistor.fm, so you can grab it from there. I actually like this. I think it's an easy way to review content once I've heard it already via video. So, and there's a lot of back catalog from last year and years past that we've got on that. So take advantage of that. Other events, I know there's a few. Clifford, do you want to speak about what other events are available?
Yeah, so as you heard from Doug, we also have a Chief Information Officer Forum. Basically, that's usually the top IT person in an organization that takes care of it. So the word CIO may not fit everybody's titles. I just say that because sometimes they're like the IT director or whatever have you. But usually the top strategic information technology person in an organization. And with the REF CIO forum, we have monthly meetings where we kind of connect, maybe about 10 times a year to be more accurate. We've got a great one coming up here in June on leadership, where we're going to have some great speakers, and then we're going to do a little bit of a field trip in July, so we're excited about that. If you are that person in your organization and you want to talk to me a little bit more about the CIO role, the top role in your organization, and about the CIO forum, just let me know.
Thanks. ISSA?
Yeah. Basically, they're restarting a lot of the work that needs to happen in ISSA. So that's the Information Security Association there. So the bottom line is that we usually had meetings, and I don't have the meeting schedule right now, but I can check and maybe at the end or connect it with Doug when you see it. But the bottom line is that this is generally the security person. So it could be your CISO, but it could be an infrastructure person. It could be other security people in the organization that needs to take care of that. And we usually have monthly meetings. We're strong in the summer, usually around food, like lunch and learn type things, where we kind of talk about various different security related issues. So,
thank you. Any other events that we should know about that the group could benefit from that any of you attend? Okay.
I forgot to mention one other thing because I heard it over here at the table.
Yeah.
There's also a Project Management Institute chapter in Fort Wayne. So not necessarily IT, although IT is a lot about managing projects. But if you're interested in that, you could also see me on that. Yeah.
We love cross-promoting events. I think it's useful to hear about whatever is available in a marketplace. We have a number of different events down in the indie market. I know Women in High Tech has a couple of events. They have a chapter here locally. They're based out of Indianapolis, and there's some data groups as well in Indy. So it pays to know what's available. August 6th is our next meeting, our next IT leaders meeting, and we have secured Ron Double, who is the head IT person at Parkview. He's going to be speaking with us, and we'll have another guest speaker as well. Super excited to have Ron. He's got a lot of gray hair like I do, and a lot of interesting experience over time. in what IT has looked like over the last 40 years. So would highly encourage you on that. November 5th will be the final session of the year here, and that will feature Jason Johnson, who's the CIO of Sweetwater. He should be fabulous as well. I would highly encourage you to make room for both of those in your calendar. The August registration should be up next week, so you'll get a follow-up email for this event, and we will have links for the next registration in that email. And it'll be at itleaders.org/NEIndiana, as always. This is your part of the meeting. Anyone have open positions in their organization, in their IT organization, that they want to talk about out loud right now?
We're looking for an application engineer, sort of somebody that's got experience with Citrix, either Synapse and desktop product, VMware. What else did that position cover? Do you remember? Yeah.
They'll probably work closely with the automation engineer too.
Okay.
And helping kind of develop solutions to automate a lot of the infrastructure stuff.
Company?
Beacon Credit.
Beacon Credit Union, application engineer. Sounds like it's a lot of the infrastructure apps, the infrastructure management applications that'll be focused on.
Yeah, and there's admins for those systems. It's the engineering level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Anyone else?
Copperworks, Copperworks STI is looking for a data analyst to support our data engineer, pulling a lot of data out of D365, our ERP system, and then also just building Power BI dashboards for end users. Really, most of our employees work directly with end users, so it gives them the opportunity to be social and also do the IT work.
Yeah.
And then also we're looking for a system administration person to help with onboarding new employees, things like backup, snapshots, stuff like that, regular system administration. So yeah, looking for both those entry-level positions to be supported by a senior employee to help them learn as well. So.
Excellent. Fabulous. Anyone else? Anyone else with open roles? Great. Fabulous. Anyone who is looking for their next position? If you're looking quietly, you may not want to say that out loud. Yikes. Or if you're considering what your options are, great. We do this at every meeting as well. So if you've got friends who are in transition, please invite them, even if they're individual contributors. Yes?
I have a friend whose son is an Eagle Scout, and he's in his third year at Purdue in West Lafayette in data science.
Yeah?
I'm looking for a summer internship, so I don't know. Yeah. A resume. I've got resumes here for him too. So.
And your name?
My name's Joe Shep.
Joe? Yeah. We've got an Eagle Scout behind the camera today. So.
Hey, I want to tag on to what Joe said. We were talking or lamenting this morning that so many of us are looking for good people, but everybody's looking for like that senior person, right? And we're not filling from below. And we got folks coming out, and fortunately in Northeast Indiana, particularly Allen County, we have some great institutions, whether it's here at Indiana Tech or some of the other institutions here in town. They're churning out good IT people, but we got to give them a chance to get their legs going, you know, and get their motor running. So I would encourage, whether that is an internship or even just planning to take somebody that's a little greener than normal and making sure they have a chance to kind of get their skills in place. I think we will be happy with that. If we don't do that, then they will definitely go somewhere else, and then that's a cycle that, and we already did that in the 80s, particularly here in Allen County. We don't really want to do that cycle again of brain drain.
Great point. Craig?
Well, Cliff, what I'm seeing a lot, because I help hire and recruit to build IT teams, they're putting career maps together for those younger, fresher people and building them to what the company needs versus finding somebody with the skills. And it's pretty cool on everything out there from learning. They can pick it up fast, and everybody wants, from Microsoft all the way down, they're getting free training. So it's pretty cool to start thinking about building people into what the company needs.
And one of the biggest things that we've noticed, bringing in young people that have no experience, is SDI is huge on giving them the opportunity to learn. So we dedicate like 10 to 15% of their week to Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, them be able to take classes on the skills that we expect them to learn. And they're much more comfortable asking questions once you give them that opportunity and expect them to understand that they're supposed to be asking questions and learning as well.
And I'll just do a quick testimonial.
Please.
I know that SDI has 2 Indiana Tech recent grads, maybe one about a year out and one another just maybe months out. So.
Yeah, and a big thanks to Indiana Tech for hosting this event. Jeff and his team support us beautifully. It's completely frictionless to come here and put this meeting on. There's a lot involved in putting a meeting on together, but they're the easy part on that. To your point, I think it's a missed form of governance in building career paths inside of IT. When we think of governance, we often think of compliance and project prioritization. How about prioritizing the employees rather than just all the projects that you're working on? I think it's a beautiful, natural, mature extension of governance. Great. Thank you. I want to express my gratitude to my employer. Expedient is a cloud services provider based in Pittsburgh, but we have locations in Indy, and we actually have 15 data centers now in 10 cities. Co-location for all these years, so high-tech landlord or outsourced data center provider. But we're one of the oldest VMware clouds in the country, one of the oldest and the largest. And a lot of clients now, with all the changes at VMware, are considering a cloud operating model with VMware for their legacy applications that run well. So got to give them a lot of credit. They let me spend my time and their money putting these events on in multiple markets. These are the different services we offer. We've got a new product that's an AI gateway that actually lets you monitor and control generative AI usage inside of your organization, and that's generated a lot of interest these days just because there's such a risk of data leakage these days when it comes to using things like ChatGPT or OpenAI. So if you're interested in talking about that, I'd be happy to talk to you about any of those. I've got this as the next IT Leaders Indiana, which is in the next 30 seconds here. Our 2 speakers today are Craig Schroda and Terry Gower. They're going to be talking about finding your team's working sweet spot. I'm really looking forward to this. I think the use of assessments are important. I think understanding your team well may be the most important thing that you do as leaders. So rather than talk more about that, I'm going to let them talk about it themselves. Terry and Craig, it's all yours.
As he's getting set up, I think it's pretty cool talking about the people building side, so it's bringing them in. That's a lot of what I do at VCIO Global, to help take IT leaders and help them become CIOs or build out teams to be more rounded. And that's where Terry helps out quite a bit. But just from an introduction standpoint, Terry and I, we used to be competitors from the South Bend area. I co-founded a company called Pinnacle at a Microsoft ERP CRM division, an IT division, and a dev agile shop for integration and customizations. And Terry founded Micro Integrations, now Analytics. We're no longer doing that. We found out leadership and building people are kind of more of our passion. It's been a fun run. But when we founded those companies, I founded mine in '96, and Terry found yours in somewhere in the same area. And kind of before internet, which is kind of aging us, right? But it's pretty cool. So we saw a lot of changes happen, and obviously AI right now is changing our world a little bit. But one thing that we're seeing a lot on is the whole person management. So when I go into a company and we talk about whole person, career development, getting career maps together so they keep growing, you have to pay attention to the personal side and the professional side now. It used to be that you could only, I had all kinds of different minds in my company. You had the accounting mind doing ERP systems, you had the developer that wanted to sit in the closet, you had the IT guys that just wanted, just fix stuff and be champions, right? And it's all good, but getting them in their sweet spot so they're the optimized person, they're the optimized team, and then the optimized company. And so that's kind of what we're doing nowadays. And I use Terry quite a bit to go through this working genius, because you have the personality assessments, which after I sold my company, my wife and I got life plan certified because we like mentoring people, and I said, boy, we better get certified so we don't screw anybody up. You know, and it's pretty neat, but when you get that person in their sweet spot from a personality standpoint, like a Myers-Briggs, 16 personalities, that's how people see the world, how they think, how they feel, and how they make decisions. And then a working genius is how people like to work. So you think about it, if you get the person being self-aware, and then you get the person in their sweet spot of work, where they're not gonna burn out, they're not gonna get frustrated, it's really cool to see. And what I do now a lot as a fractional CIO is look at the team. And sometimes they're just in the wrong seat. You know, where you have them take these assessments and they're great people, match the core values, they get it, they want it, have the capacity to do things. They're just in the wrong seat. And when you get people in that sweet spot, you see this light happen and magic happen. And I know, you know, I think we just want to be IT people, but you got to manage that person too. And when you don't pay attention to the personal side, you get this cognitive dissonance, which is they get frustrated and they don't know why, and that can lead up to a bunch of other things, mental issues. But really what you want to do is just making sure you manage the whole thing. So what Terry and I would like to go through, mostly Terry at this point, but we'll share some examples, is how this working genius assessment really works, and it has a sticky back. You know, there's millions of assessments out there, colors, Myers-Briggs, 16 personality, DISC. This one has a sticky factor, and I've seen it really get adopted. You know, versus do assessment, go away for a month and they forget about it. This one stays. You run meetings by it, you hire based on skills and letters now. So skills, I need a app dev person to do Power BI. But what's their working genius, their letters? So you marry those two up, and you got a whole different team. You got a whole different company starting to produce. So that's pretty neat to see. So, Terry, if you want to start walking through it.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. And Craig, thanks for kicking us off. You know, myself, as Craig mentioned, have been involved in IT for many, many years. And I'll just say this. I made the mistake of really thinking that it was all about me at the beginning, you know, investing in myself and certifications. And I even took that into the rest of the team where I would invest and make sure, hey, we have enough CCIEs and we have all these different certifications. What I realized is that when we started to invest in each other when it came to how we work better together, leadership and some of those other areas, our organization quadrupled in size in just a couple of years. And so one of the things that I would love to share, and number one, when I say I'd love to share, I would love to have this be a discussion where we can all talk. So there's some slides that we're going to go through. If we get through all of those, great. If we don't, we've got some active discussions and things going on. I think that's even better. So as we talk through this, I'll highlight a little bit about Working Genius, how I've seen it help organizations, and then we can just take some questions as well as we go through it. So one of the things that I would love to do kind of as we talk about collaboration, I'd love to get some thoughts from each one of you. What are some of the greatest challenges as a leader? We're all leaders here, and I'll define leadership as influence. So if we have influence, we're a leader. So does anyone want to share kind of what they think one of the greatest challenges is for them as being a leader?
For me, being an IT manager at 32 years old and having employees that are older than me, one of my biggest challenges is mentoring people that are already in their career, okay, and then also meeting them at their level, but only focusing on work and not focusing on their personal life, because they definitely like lean and cross that line sometimes, and it's like, I'm trying to help, but I can only help so much. Like
yes,
that kind of stuff. So that whole dynamic is very interesting.
Yeah.
One cool thing that you might want to consider if you have older people working that you're managing, there's a cool book called Wisdom at Work. And it's about reverse mentoring, where you get digital intelligence and emotional intelligence, start teaming people up together, because we got 5 generations in the workforce now, and getting people to cross with their strengths, really, really cool to see. But you got to get it on the table and say, this is what we're intentionally doing, and boy, does it takes off pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I've seen in that scenario too is, especially dealing with some of the older generation, let's say they've got years of experience and wisdom, is if there's an area you're mentoring, look at times of changing it into a question rather than saying, I think we should do this. Pose it the question, what would happen if we did this, or what's your thought about this? And ultimately, what it does is it sometimes can lower that barrier where they start to just become more invested in what it is that you're ultimately hoping that they will do.
Yeah.
So, any other challenges or thoughts?
Cliff, did you agree on it?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's pretty common right now, and it kind of piggybacks off of what was just said, is just in motivating people in general, because they have various different motivations, particularly at this stage, whether it's things different from generational standpoints, of where they're in their career, where they're in their professional career, personal life, family, and things of that nature. We all have these various different things. And I think one of the things that we kind of look our leaders to do is to be able to motivate and lead us no matter where we're at,
Yes.
right? Globally or collectively.
Yeah.
Keeping you in the sweet spot where your passions and your
Yep.
strength intersect, and knowing yourself. I think the best gift you can give anybody is a gift of self-awareness. The second is self-regulation.
Yeah.
So now that you have these strengths, what do you do with them?
Absolutely. You know, Clifford, I'll say one thing that I think once we go through a little bit with Working Genius, where I think that could also help, is that when I think of motivation, it's almost as if I've got something that I want you to do, and I want you to get excited about that. I think with Working Genius, what we can learn is once we understand more about individuals, their sweet spot where they get joy and fulfillment becomes more inspiration, which is a pull. I'm pulling something from you because I know this is your strength and allowing you to kind of jump in and get excited about that. So, good. Any other thoughts?
I'd say just dealing with staff sometimes and mentoring them. In the IT world, we have extreme introverts in the departments and trying to grow them into positions of maybe leadership and trying to foster that growth and still recognize their personality types and kind of get them out of their shells.
Yeah,
Do you do any assessments today?
Yeah, we've done some Myers-Briggs before in the past, so. And yeah, seeing just the very extreme, introversion in multiple staff.
Yeah. The 116 personalities is the modern Myers-Briggs. It's free, it's 5 minutes. But to see those people that you're trying to mentor, have them do it and then reflect and say, no, this is how you're wired. Now let's work around that. Let's work with that. It's neat to see. It's just part of what we have to do now.
Yeah. Even in our own internal meetings, even just getting people to sit at the table, like Claire in our departments, we're to the point where we put envelopes at the table, and one of them has $5 in it. It's just to get in our internal staff meetings, people to actually sit at the table. I think COVID's kind of given people, the ability to kind of sit on the outskirts of the room and just bring people in and talking together is difficult.
Very cool, very cool.
Yeah. You got one?
I'll piggyback off that a little bit, and part of it is the introvert thing, but many of the issues I deal with every day is communications. And I think we sell communication short, where there's just an assumption made from my team sometimes that, hey, I told them that 4 weeks ago, and it's like, no, that's not enough. We work very well together at Indiana Tech, but that work involves communication to be sure that people always know what the status is and why it's taking so long or why we're doing it this way. And trying to build that communication skill into the team, it's hard.
Yeah. And pounding on the why. That's what people can get behind a why, or a process if they know the why a lot more. And it seems like you get tired of saying the why, but there was one statistic you have to tell everybody 7 times before they remember it. Now it's up to 35. It's seriously, it is that high.
Yeah.
So it is neat, but it's just something, get the why, and then you can see that motivation. But we forget that, because like, I told you once, right? And you just expect them to remember it. But,
No, for sure. Well, I'll say this, in the companies that I work with, communication will come up in the top 3 almost every single time, sometimes 1 or 2. So spot on for sure. Yeah.
I would add toxic high performers in teams. People who get everything done, who often choose not to delegate, but leave a trail of destruction behind them with the other team members.
Yeah.
I see, that used to be like the top salesperson, and then people didn't want to get rid of that person because they're the revenue generator,
Right.
And but you wanted confidence, you didn't want necessarily cocky, right? But I see people driving into that storm a lot harder now and saying, you're affecting our environment too much, because culture is so important to protect now. And but you're right, keeping those toxic people that won't fix itself.
Yeah. I've certainly made that mistake myself. There had been a time in the past where we had a network engineer, architect, CCIE, brilliant and talented. And unfortunately kept that person too long, hurt our culture, and the thought was, well, we can't afford to lose them because what happens to our network, what happens to our environment, they know so much. Ultimately, when we stepped through that, what I learned is that the rest of the team rallied around what we needed to, came together, and I wish we'd have done it 6 months sooner. So, great points. Well, I'll tell you for me, one of the greatest challenges that I have is leading myself. And so it's sometimes easy for us to tell others what they should do or what we think they should do. For me, it's sometimes harder to lead myself. And that kind of comes, Craig, you talked a little bit about self-awareness, and we'll talk about that through Working Genius, but the importance of understanding ourselves. And so, we talk a little bit about become good at leading yourself. And that looks different for many of us. So Craig, when we think about leading ourselves, what would be one thing for you, leading yourself, that you would strive to?
We talk about all these assessments, it's making sure you know your own assessment and how you're wired. Like me, I'm a builder. I like to start things and I like to hand it off and let somebody else finish. If you're not, and you just put that on the table, it's like, I need people to finish things because I like climbing mountains. I like starting things. And so making sure everybody you're just vulnerable. It's not even a vulnerable thing. It's like, this is me, this is you, how do we work together?
Yeah.
So I think it's just making sure you're not just passing the buck and you're being honest with yourself.
Yeah, and I think the vulnerability kind of comes down to the third point, being secure in your own leadership. So once we understand, here's the things that I'm good at, here's my strengths, okay? Being secure to know that these are things that I want to do more of. And also when it comes to weaknesses, not trying to hide those. So in other words, I know these are my challenges or weaknesses. We know where everyone else's are in our team, and again, being secure with that. And again, knowing and working within your strengths. I think there's been a theory, matter of fact, even in schools, many of the schools right now, the thought is, we want to try to get pretty good at everything. And if there's certain areas that you're not so good, let's focus on those. Well, research has shown us, especially in business, focusing on your strengths is where we should be. Because if we think about it, no one really wants to pay for average. I think about, we can have all the talent we want. I think about Michael Jordan, back in the 90s, arguably one of the world's greatest basketball players. Decides that he wants to take and go into baseball. Well, he still had the same amount of work ethic and the same amount of other gifts, but he wasn't as gifted in baseball. Came back to basketball, and of course we know what happened as well. So I think that's something that, again, we're focusing on is knowing what our strengths are and working within those strengths, and understanding that we're going to have challenges, we all do, but how can we bring others in to kind of mitigate those? And when we think about others, and we talked a little bit about team, what are some of the greatest challenges that we could see for teams or teams that you guys have worked with? Any thoughts there?
I know that we are expecting our teams to perform, right? And how do you get the optimal performance out of the team without breaking them, obviously, but and still keep everybody, satisfied. So I think that's one of the challenges that we have. And obviously, I would go back to what Jeff said. That communication is important in there too.
Yeah, I think even probably what I should have said is even let's define what a team is. Because I think a lot of times team is just this word that's used, but really the team would be a group that's sharing a common goal, that they also have common rewards when there's success to the team. And there's times in organizations where we may call it a team, but really are we sharing the same goal? Are we willing to put ourselves, number two, for the good of the actual team and the organization?
Yeah, I think going back to what Craig said over there about a career map, I think sometimes we get blindsided by the day-to-day nuances that we all deal with, that we sometimes forget to show a clear message to our team of how they should grow. And I think that generates frustration, generates lack of wanting to be there. That's why people go out and look. It generates just a dragging of the culture, and I think it affects morale, right? So if people are unhappy, it's a cancer, right? So negativity is easy to spread. We see it every day in everything that we read. Positivity, not so much, right? We see that in social media, on the news. Take your pick, right? How often do you see positive things versus how much do you see negative things? So we know what sells, And I think that's how we're kind of wired, back to your point. But I feel like, kind of piggybacking both of those things, I think that's an area I'm probably weak at, is really providing a direct map, like, hey, here's your real path to go from 1 year to 3 year to 5 year, to grow with inside my organization and to do that. And I think that's a challenge.
Including yourself, right? Because they see more as caught than taught, right? I mean, if they see you having a crew map, and I do that a lot with IT directors that we're working in to be CIO, so I can exit, right? And just the soft skills. It's the, hey, listen, be an active listener, don't interrupt people. Some of that stuff so you can operate at an executive level. So when you see that, yeah, you're improving yourself, and they're like, we're just a culture of improvement and learning. And it's pretty neat, but everybody's got to feel that. So good comments, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. It reminds me of the time, many years ago, I always thought, you get on the airplane and they talk about the oxygen mask, and some of you probably heard that, where, put it on yourself first and then take care of the others. And I thought, man, that's so selfish. I'm about other people. I want to take care of them, and then I'll worry about myself. But if I'm not healthy, you can't take care of the others. So Craig, I think it's a great point about investing in ourselves. It's something that, I've struggled and continue to struggle with, is making margin so that I can invest in myself, making margin. And then what would happen a lot of times is somebody would say, hey, I need you, or this or that. And then the time that I devoted to myself is usually the first thing that I give back to meetings and other things like that. So definitely can be a struggle.
One of the things that we struggle with, and I think it's just the size of the team, is we're fostering a culture on our team for everyone to work together. So that's one of my jobs, is to foster a culture. So we do bi-weekly catch-ups. But then also, I'm fostering a belief about my team amongst the whole group. So all the other teams, how they view IT. And so like we were talking about with the toxic team contributor, I have a guy on my team that will go out constantly and try to solve problems. And I'm like, you don't understand the bigger picture of what we're doing here. And every time you go out and do that, you're changing the dynamic of what I'm presenting to the rest of the group, because you don't understand what's going on in the bigger picture. So maintaining both those things separately and trying to build everyone up is an interesting process.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have one-on-ones?
Yeah, we do one-on-ones every 2 weeks, so we constantly talk about it and review it and have those discussions all the time.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't know what the clear target is.
Yep.
I saw this in industrial, blue collar. No, we want you to be positive. You can't be negative. Like, oh, now and we give them a scoreboard. A lot of people use EOS now. It's called the People Analyzer. Like, they just want to know what the scorecard is that they have to hit, and then they adjust. So it's the one-on-ones, and then to the whole person management. There's a best practice out there. It's like every, you should do it weekly, or if it's bi-weekly, whatever. But every third one, make it personal. Is there anything going on in your life that's going to affect work? And just shut up and let them talk, because there's something, you can see their performance going downhill, but it might be grandma's in the hospital, kids, whatever, something's going on. That whole person management is starting to see sticky retention and optimization too. And it's kind of a rhythm to get in.
Yeah, for sure.
One other thing, I think it's been a thread that's been running through many of these, is that IT is part of a bigger team called a business. And if we can't establish that to the people that we talk to every day, if they don't understand that we're a support mechanism that enables them to do the best work that they can do operationally, or accounting-wise, or even at the line level. I had a very early mentor that talked about standing in breach, about the best employees tend to connect two disparate groups together. And I think IT has a very unique opportunity to do that every day of the week.
Mm-hmm. IT has more social impact, and company impact, and culture impact than it's ever had. Number one, I'm beating the drum. IT has to be represented at the executive team now, non-through CFO filter. And IT is everywhere. It's just not siloed. It's like, even with budgets, it's like everything goes through IT now. It's like, how do you decipher that up? But when you talk to people, when your junior, senior support people talk to anybody, they can have a cultural positive or a cultural negative impact. And we have a ton of influence now, which we have to take seriously. Before, if I fix your stuff, good, I go back to my job. It's not that way anymore. It's how it interacts with all the other departments.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So let's talk through a couple things with reference to a team, kind of on that theme of self-awareness. We've talked a little bit about this in just our discussion, but studying and knowing the people on your team. And we'll talk a little bit about with the Working Genius assessment as one way to understand and know your team. but communicate how everyone fits on the team. This is another big one, is making sure that everyone that sits there knows exactly what their role is and over-communicate that. Clarity is super, super important, because what studies have shown is that once everyone really, truly understands where they fit on the team, then all of a sudden their productivity starts to go up, their engagement goes up as well. And I think this last point, emphasize completing over competing. Again, completing one another to say, here's my strengths, here's your strengths, here's how we're better together. Now, healthy competition, I think, is not a bad thing, okay? But what we don't want is competition to get to the next title or the next position. It's more about how can we actually look to the success of the team as our first goal. So now what I'd love to do is kind of transition a little bit into the Working Genius model. And so by show of hands, how many of you have either taken the Working Genius assessment or are familiar with it? Okay, great. So we've got a pretty good amount. Awesome. And then of you, how many of your teams have also been a part of it as well? Have we looked at it as a team as well too? Okay.
So ours has been more focused on, because I'm on the executive board, so ours has been more focused on the executive.
Okay.
I did have my leadership do it, just
Okay.
for that, but I mean, I don't know that we've expanded into the rest of the technicians
Okay.
and things.
Awesome.
So we've just focused it on the leadership side,
Okay.
and then we kind of compared, you know, at the executive level where we all kind of fit in and, you know, complement each other, and, you know.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so what I love about that is that if there's things that you've picked up, let's keep this an open conversation. So there might be things that we mentioned, because ultimately, if I were working with a company to do this, we would probably be sitting down for 3 to 4 hours together going through this. And there's a lot of things that we may highlight, but if there's important parts of what you've learned that you liked, or maybe something that you didn't, let's kind of share that as well. So I think one of the things that I'd like to share, and Craig, you talked a little bit about this, what makes Working Genius assessment different? You know, there's personality assessments, there's a lot of different tools out there. I think there's a couple of things that I've seen. Number one, Working Genius is about 80% productivity. So it really has more to do with the art of getting things done. We like to say in the Working Genius world, there are 6 steps to getting anything done, and we'll understand that those are the 6 areas of the Working Genius. So really about 80% productivity, 20% personality assessment. I think the second thing would be it's extremely easy to understand and comprehend. So, you know, Craig and I, we were talking the other day, we've both done 16 personalities, but it's really hard if I say I'm an INFP and you're an ESTJ, what does that mean? How do we work together? So again, Working Genius is really simple when it comes to understanding it. And I think also the fact that it's applied to work makes it something that a lot of people on the C-suite love to work with. Because again, sometimes the assessments have this reputation of being kind of soft or really not as valuable to business. Working Genius solves that because number one, it is about work, it's about business, and it's something that's easy to understand. Frank, any thoughts? So what I'd love to do is just briefly kind of talk about the different geniuses that we have. And when Patrick Lencioni talked about this, you'll notice that this spells widget. He had talked about on one of the podcasts that I think he got to about the E when he realized, hey, this can spell something, and so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it spells something that we can use. But what I would love to do is talk through these different areas. Number one, anytime that we start any type of a process, it typically belongs to the genius of wonder. And so what is wonder? Wonder is the genius that kind of ponders the possibilities, asks the question, could this be better? Could this be different? The genius of wonder almost has like a sixth sense to sense, I think that there's opportunity here. Doesn't necessarily know what that is, but can kind of feel that. And I think a lot of us have worked with somebody that has the genius of wonder. The next genius we look at is the genius of invention. So that inventor kind of responds to that question to say, hey, I've got some great ideas. The genius of invention, somebody that loves a whiteboard, somebody that loves starting from scratch. That would really be the invention. Once we have these ideas, now we have to go to the next step, which is kind of that discernment. Of these 3 or 4 ideas, how many of these will work well for our company, for our organization, what we're trying to do? And so the discernment kind of comes through to look at that, and then typically we'll then go back to the inventor again, and they call this the ID loop, where it kind of goes back and forth to realize, okay, here's some changes, what if you tried this and that? And before too long, we now have an idea, a process that makes sense. The discerner now gives it to the galvanizing, and the galvanizing genius is really someone that loves to rally the troops, loves to look to say, okay, this is what we agreed that we're going to do. Here's some areas that I think we can use to get this done. Let's keep people motivated, and not only motivated, but keep pointing them back to what was the overall goal of what we decided to do. After galvanizing, you go to enablement. And I know a lot of times enablement can kind of have a bad connotation. You know, we think, well, you're an enabler or you do this or that. Let's think of enablement in the positive term, almost like support. Somebody with the genius of enablement sees what it is that we're trying to accomplish and raises their hand to say, hey, I want to jump in, or I know others that I can get involved, and they almost anticipate what the next steps will be before we actually even need to take them. And then the very last genius, the genius of tenacity, that's the genius that says, okay, it's time to get this over the finish line. You know, I can think of countless different projects I'd been involved with in years past where we just couldn't get them to completion. I didn't realize that we didn't really have someone with the genius of tenacity on our team. And so the genius of tenacity is somebody that looks at the specs to say, this is what we agreed we would do, here's all the details, I want to make sure that we get this across the finish line. And I think it's important to understand that it doesn't mean just because the person has the genius of tenacity, they're doing all of that work themselves. What it really is they're the ones taking the lead to make sure that they and others are actually completing what we need to.
So a funny, or not funny story, I'm an IG, you know, build it, cheerleader everybody on, hand it off to get done. I had my wife do it. She's a D and T, and I always thought, why should poke holes in my idea? You know, it causes all this conflict. I'm like, this is a great idea. And she'd say, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? I'm like, what do you put? I felt that it put me down. Ever since we did that, our relationship, I'm like, oh, you're discerning my ideas. And our relationship went to another level. So the personal side is funny. I mean, not funny, because I finally did it after 33 years. And it was like, so it is funny, but it's like, but it just makes, you know, personally it work and professionally.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And similar thing with my wife and I, she is enablement tenacity, so kind of that finisher. And you know, for years she didn't understand. She says, Terry, can you go to the store and where's your list? And I thought, well, I don't have a list. Just tell me what you need and I'll go get it. She's like, no, you need a list. And it just was interesting where we would operate differently. And once we understood how we were different, we understood how we could help each other and work better together. And that kind of takes us into what we call guilt and judgment. And so for me personally, there have been times since, well, I'm not really gifted in a genius and that enablement or tenacity, that kind of taken it across the finish line, that I would have a lot of things started and nothing finished. And I would just be, man, there's something wrong with me. Because I need to finish this, but all of a sudden something else comes up and it's like, well, let me look at this too. And before long, I'm just not getting the things done that I needed to. And so there's this guilt that I felt personally to understand, why am I this way? What's wrong with me? Do I just not have enough motivation to do things that I see others doing? Working Genius is something that really helped me to understand that as I went through that too. And when we take it away from ourselves and now we go to judgment, now all of a sudden we have this scenario where we can judge others. Well, wait a second, why are they not good at that? Or, you know, there's this term called the fundamental attribution error. And it really, I think if we want to factor down to what it means, it basically means that we judge others on their results. We judge ourselves on kind of our intentions. So we really are much harder on others than we are on ourselves. You know, think about this. How many times have maybe you walked into a meeting, let's say it's a really important meeting, and somebody walks in 3 or 4 minutes late. You know, I know myself, I might think, okay, that's rude, or maybe that person's lazy or don't care, whatever it is, but you kind of form that judgment. But if I walked in 3 minutes late, well, it's because I'm busy, I had to do this, and so I kind of cut myself a break. And so what we learned is that once we understand with Working Genius where, you know, the individual's geniuses, their frustrations are, we understand that judgment can take a backseat to what we're feeling. So I won't spend too much time on this one, but this one really talks about the 3 stages of work. And so This wandering invention, really that's the ideation stage. That's where we're coming up with the ideas. The middle part is one that actually was, the activation is a part that a lot of people even never really thought about. A lot of times people before working Genius would think, hey, we got an idea, and it's time to implement it. Not really understanding that that activation, that discernment to determine is that idea a good idea, or the galvanizing to make sure that we're stepping forward and rallying the troops to do that was a very, very important part of it. And then when we get into the enablement tenacity, that's really into the implementation of what we're doing. And this is a neat one when we talk about responsive versus disruptive. And so of the geniuses, we've got 3 geniuses being responsive, and then on the lower, 3 geniuses being disruptive. So responsive, the genius of wonder, I'm basically responding to the environment around me. What it is that I think the need is or where the potential exists, but it's basically a response to the environment around. The inventor, that's disruptive. That's basically taking what input of the genius of wonder, and that's coming up with ideas and disrupting what that might be. Again, discernment, we're now responding to the inventor. The galvanizer, now again, we're back to the disruptive. Now we're inspiring and motivating people to accomplish what it is we need to do, what we agreed to do. Enablement, now again, I'm back to the responsive side again. With enablement, I'm responding to the call of the galvanizer, the rallying cry, to make sure that I'm helping our team do what we need to do, to make sure that I'm anticipating what it is. And tenacity, again, disruptive, meaning that we're taking it across the finish line and making sure we complete it based on the specs that we've agreed to.
I learned a lot because I'm a double disruptive. So people get mad at me, people are working hard on Excel spreadsheet and why don't you use Power BI? I just worked 20 hours trying to get this Excel thing together. And just keeping, we could be better and get things moving. So it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, well, and for me, I'm double responsive, and probably the one time that I realized that double responsive for me and responding to others is that I was having a monthly staff meeting. Well, it actually was an all-company meeting in this case, and I had about 150 of us, and I'm going through this PowerPoint, and really what I was trying to do was model myself after someone else that I really respected that was a great presenter, super exciting, encouraging, and I just realized that about halfway through, I'm just not connecting with the company. And so there was a question that somebody had asked, and before long, I started fielding questions, and we just turned it into a town hall format. And it just happened just kind of organically. What I didn't realize through that is our meeting that went from 3:30 to 4:30 actually ended up taking 3.5 hours, and everybody stayed because all of a sudden that was a forum to ask questions and really get into what it was. And so for me, I realized the way that I wanted to connect with the organization was through a town hall format where we could just have a relational conversation. So every meeting after that, I changed to that format because that's really what suited myself. And so I think what we'll learn through this assessment is the more that we can become our authentic self and our authentic leader, I think the better that we can be when it comes to leading the team, because they can tell the difference. I was trying to model myself after somebody that was really motivational, and they could see right through them. That's just not me. So this is a fun slide. One of the things, and I may have not mentioned, Patrick Lencioni is the one that actually created the Working Genius, not only the model, but the assessment as well. And so I love when he talks about this, but there's so many different ways to look at this model. This is one that we think about the altitude of the genius. And so if we think about it from, let's just use a plane analogy. We're at 30,000 feet, the genius of wonder. And so with that genius, we're basically deciding where is it that this plane is headed. And just a couple degree change at that altitude makes a huge difference on the destination. And so, let's say that the genius of wonder might say, okay, we're here, we've got this team in the plane. We need to go somewhere. We need to go somewhere where we can connect, and we need to go somewhere where we can energize as a team. Well, all of a sudden we drop down to 25,000 feet. We're down to the genius of invention. The invention says, you know what, I've got an idea. I think we should go to Big Sky in Montana because that's great there. There's a lot of great skiing there. There's places that we can go. The discerner looks at that idea, and now we're down to 20,000 feet and says, you know what, it's February right now, just had a huge snowstorm. This is not a great idea. There's not even an airport that has the right fuel for us to land. So now we go back to the inventor again and say, you know what? Okay, let's change this. Let's go to Scottsdale, Arizona. You know what? We've got great golf there. We've got great nature. And so the discerner comes back and says, okay, this makes sense. Now we're down to that galvanizing. We've decided this is what we're doing. Now we're down at 15,000 feet. The genius of galvanizing starts to say, okay, let's get everybody excited. What do we need to do to go to Scottsdale? Here's the things that we can do. And let's make sure that everyone is rallied around this to make sure we accomplish this. And this is going to be a great retreat for us. Then we get down to 10,000 feet. Now we're down to the enablement side. Well, we need to start to prepare to land this thing. We need to call the towers and make sure that we're doing what we need to do. So what things do we need to do to accomplish that? Who do I need to involve and anticipate the needs? And then finally, we're down to 5,000 feet to the ground. Now all of a sudden, we're at the tenacity. What's the final stages? Okay, we have to buckle the seat belts. We have to do whatever we need to go down to the bottom.
So we actually did this at our company, our executive leadership team, and I misunderstood this, so I actually asked a question to our president, and I thought, like, this is levels of leadership. So I read this, when I saw this, as the CIO, and the C-suite people are at the top, and then your supervisors are at the bottom. Yeah. And he explained to me that it's not necessarily like in a ladder like that, but it's more of a C-suite team should try to have one of each of these personalities on the team so that they're well balanced. And instead, you can have galvanizers and enablers, which is my specialty, and you can also have wonderers and inventors all on the same team, and they're just looking at things differently. And so that was a big change for me in the way I viewed things, because I thought because mine were at the bottom of this that I would never be able to get up to that level. Yeah. And so when we explained that, it was really great.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point. And I think what also every one of us does each one of these 6 geniuses. Every one of us does. What we'll find through this assessment is really where do we get the most joy, energy, and fulfillment. And that's the big thing. But another point that I can mention too is I've done this with a lot of different organizations. There's a lot of CIOs and CEOs that I've met that are ETs. And the thought is if you're a CEO, you've got to be the big visionary. You've got to really be in the W or the I. Not true at all. Some of the best organizations have ETs. So again, there's not one of these that's better than the other, but as you illustrated, having a mix where we have everyone covered, we'll talk a little bit about that as a team, is big. Yeah.
What happens if you catch your teams being too compartmentalized with you have too many E's and T's, right? Like you have really tenacious people and people who can get results. They lack innovation, they lack ideas, they lack content, creative ideas, and change. Or the opposite, you have these really pie-in-the-sky types of brilliant people, but they don't really have any of the enablers or the tenacious people that can get the results that you want. So like, how do you prevent from ending up with too many of the same personality types, and then it becomes a problem?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll say this. Sometimes the results of that are different than you might expect. I worked with a company about 6 months ago, and almost their entire executive leadership team had geniuses in the enablement and tenacity. So walking into that, common knowledge might say, man, these guys may have great ideas, but they finish stuff all the time. It was just the opposite. They couldn't get anything finished because they were always in the tactics and never really focusing on up above what it is that they had needed. What we ended up doing for that group that helped solve that is we did the working genius for the next level leaders and found out that they had some geniuses at that next level. And we then brought them into some of the strategic meetings and really kind of helped supplement. And then what that also did is gave them a path of trajectory where they had more influence, and it just kind of really had a great result. I'll say if you also don't have that, there's times where somebody might bring in a consultant for, let's say, a meeting to say, okay, I know you have these geniuses. We're going to hire you for a half a day to sit in and kind of help us through that. So those are kind of 2 ways that I've seen that accommodate.
Yeah, either hire or borrow. Yeah. If you know you're missing that hole, you got to get it into that team just to keep them relative on a pulse.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. What he said is you have to identify that, and I think as we look to elevate people, or when we feel missing things, you try to look for those missing skill sets, because our group covered the gamut, but we did have some holes in there. I mean, and some of them were obvious, right? Like our founder, we knew, I could have told you what Michael was without even doing it, just because he was a wonder guy, and he's been in the business forever and a day, and you could just see it in him if you know him. And it was also interesting to me when we looked at our executive team, how close I could almost just mentally say, I know that's a tenacious person. Our CFO defines the word tenacious. And it's like, absolutely she fell through that. And then some others surprised me. Some of the ones that we found that we were closer to and we realized what happens sometimes is you'll have your peers that you kind of gravitate towards, and you find out that you guys are very complimentary, of each other, and you don't even realize that. And then that made a big difference of how you perceive and look at that.
Yeah.
But I think you have to look when you bring someone in. I mean, this is part of our assessment now. When we bring in an executive or look at that, as a group strategically, we look to see where they fit, to see how they're going to build that cohesion with the rest of the team that have to fill those
Hiring on letters and skills, I'm telling you, is key. And to your point of that, thank you for sharing all that, the letters are sticky. Like ENFJ, you can't put a team together based on that. That's self-awareness, but this builds out and rounds out teams. Cliff?
Yeah, and Terry made this point, and I think it's worthy of emphasizing because he went past it so quickly. And David also made the same point. I mean, we find out who we are, but that doesn't mean that we're exclusively in any one of these, in any of the assessments, right? We may have a portion of us, it's just what might be most comfortable or most dominant or anything else of that nature. And sometimes, because leadership is situational, we might have to step outside and have a more case of wonderment. I mean, that might be a retreat. Go off to the side and think about this. How might we do this better? How are we going to increase sales? What's our SWOT analysis? We might take ourselves out of T and get us in the W for a little bit. And we have to do that. So again, I think that there's some pliability to it. And we definitely have a comfort zone. We definitely, how we like to work. But that doesn't mean that we're exclusively in that one.
Absolutely agree. And one thing that research has also shown is that a lot of times when we go outside of our area of genius, we may be doing it to support our genius. And so what I mean by that is, let's say we're enablement and tenacity, and so we really focus on, and we get joy and fulfillment on getting those things done or across the finish line. There's times where to support this genius, we may have to go up to the ideation to come up with an idea of how we can get it across the finish line faster and smoother. And so a lot of times when people say, well, I can do this pretty well, there's times that something may not be in their genius, they can do it well, and a lot of times it's to support some of their other geniuses, they just don't really realize it. So what I would love to do is talk a minute about a profile. And so some of you that have taken the assessment have seen the profile. I'll just show you quickly my profile, and this is just one page of it. But what I really want to do is talk about these three things here. Working genius is what we've talked a lot about, but there's something called the working competency and the working frustration. And so what I'd love to do is think of this, we'll think of this as a coffee cup. So we're at coffee, we have something like the Starbucks cup, and we've got coffee inside there, we've got the lid on the top, okay? When that coffee is staying hot all day long, that's our working genius. That's something that we can do all day long and we feel good about it. It doesn't drain us. We feel fulfilled, we feel joy from that. If we take the top off of that and we just have a cup with no lid, okay, it stays warm for a while, but ultimately it's going to cool down much faster. That's kind of a working competency. That's something that we're probably good at. That's something that we can do for a while, but the longer we do it, it starts to drain us. Last but not least, working frustration. That would be the same coffee cup, but what we basically do is we just drill some holes in the bottom and it's just pouring out. That's something that as we're doing it, it's draining. We know it, we can feel it. Doesn't mean we can't do it, doesn't mean that we may not be good at it, but that's the working frustration. And so for me, this is one of the slides in the assessment. Discernment and wonder are my genius. My working competency, like it says, these are your likely areas of working competency that you're capable and don't mind providing, but again, it's not long-term, and then working frustration is I and T. And for me personally, when I saw this assessment, at first I was kind of frustrated, because I thought I'm a CEO and ideation is on the bottom for me. I thought it's not true. I make decisions all the time and I've got great ideas. And what I never realized, there was a point when our organization got to about 100 of us. And I remember going to our executive team and I met with some clients and they said, we used to like you guys better when you were smaller. You've gotten so big that, we just don't like as much your organization. And it kind of was a step back for me. And additionally in that conversation though, they said, but we like the fact that you've got a lot more people, so if something happens, you've got, you know, other resources you can bring in and this and that. And so I came to the team and I said, here's what I heard from the client. They want us to be small, but also be big. And I remember just telling them this big thing. And so they come with all these different, you know, the team came up with all these different ideas about, well, rather than having, you know, this big service desk with 30 people, what if we break people down into pods and have a specialty escalation? And so that way, most of the time, they're still dealing with their same resources, but only when things get really difficult do they escalate to these other resources. And so
That was before it was a model.
that was before it was a model. This is many, many years ago. And so I thought, this sounds great. So I discerned it. What I never realized until Working Genius is that wasn't my idea. I just gave them a big picture of, here's a potential issue. They came up with the ideas, and I helped discern it. And so then when I realized I'm really not gifted at ideas, I'm just gifted at looking at other ideas and seeing what may or may not work. And so one of the frustrations, not a working frustration, but one of the frustrations I've seen with certain individuals is that when they get this assessment, they try to look to see, well, how does it fit their job? You know, I remember talking to a chief innovation officer, and his ideation and wonder were frustrations. And he's like, well, I don't agree with this. When we started to dig into it, we found out that really his lack of agreement had nothing to do with who he was. It had more to do with the role that he was actually positioned in. Fast forward about 7 or 8 months, he moved into a different role in the organization, has been flourishing. So there's interesting things about assessments, but what I can say is if there's certain things that if you were to take this assessment that just kind of strike you wrong or don't feel right, start to dig in a little bit to why that might be. And a lot of times it could be because of what you're expected to do versus, again, what you're authentically wanting to do. So one thing I'd love to just talk a little bit about is the power and the magic of Working Genius really comes alive when you apply it to our team. Okay, so it's helpful for each one of us to know kind of where our joy and fulfillment, because ultimately the things that we find joy and fulfillment doing are the things that we're usually the best at doing. Okay. This is a sample, what we call a team map, is when we run this for an executive team or any team in your organization, we can then place everyone into their categories of genius and frustration. And so as we look at this, a couple of questions that people a lot of times ask, well, what about the working competency? Why isn't that put in there? And there's a couple reasons. Number one, putting a working competency makes it a little bit harder to read. And number two, I think what we need to do is we need to look at a competency as something that we don't want to encourage using more of. And so we really focus on the genius and the frustration. Last thing that we do when we look at a team is there's an asterisk by Ross. You might wonder, well, what's the asterisk mean? Well, Ross is the CEO of this organization. And so the reason we put an asterisk is typically the CEO will almost count for 2 times what a normal genius would be. So in other words, this genius and tenacity is going to be a focus. And of course, the frustration with reference to wander, when you've got Ross and these other with frustration and you've got only one person with that genius, is going to be an area that we need to pay particular attention to this team. Because of the conflict, for sure. But ultimately, the goal, I think, is, as a few of you have said, is to hopefully have the geniuses covered. In this case, there's no genius of discernment.
That's danger zone. You could drive off a cliff. Somebody's not knowing the goals in the idea, making sure budgets are met, making sure proper processes are met. That's a danger zone right there.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, but for sure. Another danger zone in this one is we've got a lot of galvanizers. And so they're going to be excited to get this company to do a lot of different things. May not be the right things because we're not discerning it well, but by all means, man, we're going to be excited to rally the troops around a lot of different things. And ultimately what can happen is things don't come to fruition. They kind of go back again and really nothing gets completed.
So,
Yep. Go ahead.
some of my clients really struggle with discernment, and they'll sit and like spin their tires on strategy, direction, and things like that for years. And you know, they've got big ideas and they got people that can get there, but they don't have anybody in the middle that can put their thumb on it and say, this is best for us as a group.
Mm-hmm.
And where would you most likely pull discernment geniuses out of maybe some of these other ones where you say maybe they're not in the right position, right, to kind of tap
Yeah.
into some of that?
Yeah, so discernment's a really, I mean, they're all important, but discernment, a couple different things that I would look at is there somebody or a group with the working competency that has discernment? That can be a little bit of a stopgap. So a working competency, again, is somebody that has some experience there. They do maybe not find joy, but they can do it if they have to, okay? The concern with that is that if they do it long term, they'll experience the same burnout as somebody that's got the frustration. Again, when it comes to discernment, bringing somebody into that from another part of the organization that you trust with the actual information that we're talking about. The hard part is these are kind of hardwired as to who we are. I've taken the assessment multiple times just to say, will I ever be different? And I haven't been. Craig, same thing. I know you've done it, and we stay with where we are. So it becomes difficult. What I can say is I don't think that anyone will use this as a de facto tool to say, bring this into the organization, let's fire certain people. I mean, that's not necessarily what we're trying to do. But what it does do is it puts that self-awareness. So if there is a time when somebody has the frustration of discernment and they discern and they do something well, we can actually encourage them to say, you know what, I know that this is not something that you enjoy doing. This is something that is not in your sweet spot, but again, you did it, and we really appreciate you did that for the group.
Yeah, so not to go to another thing, but there's another good book called Good to Great, if you've ever read. And I think you have to partner this with who's the right people on the bus. And so there's some core philosophies out of there, and I think this isn't just one way. I mean, sometimes you do have to be honest, okay? I understand you say you just don't want to fire somebody, but that person may not be in the right seat, as we keep talking about earlier. And that's like a tough thing to do sometimes, but you have to be honest sometimes on your team and your organization, like, this just ain't gonna happen. I mean, this guy either needs to be moved, or this just may not be the right person for my organization. And that's a tough discussion, but it's something you have to have. Those right people, I ask myself all the time, if I'm in the middle of the ocean, who do I want in the boat with me? It's not about their credentials, by the way. It's about who's gonna help me get to land. You know, at the end of the day, that's who I care about, you know, and you have to have those hard things about this. And I try to look at this and partner with those good to great constructs, because I really think those two are so complementary of each other. And to me, that's how I feel like we've been successful, because you do have to assess that. You know, you're missing discernment, you got no one. I mean, that could be like, maybe I need to hire somebody, or maybe I don't have the right people on this mix.
Have you ever used the People Analyzer, BOS, or that? Have you ever looked that up?
Yes.
I mean, well, it makes it subjective. Like,
right.
Any minuses, like, I like your analogy in the middle of the ocean. It gets you to the truth.
Right.
You know, not rational. It's truth. You know, that's what you got to get to.
Right.
One thing I'm excited about, with reference to Working Genius and bringing someone on the team, had a lot of clients that have used this in their interview process, where they're hiring someone and giving that assessment. And at first I thought, you know, how is that going to come across? Are people going to say, no, I don't want to do this? And in every situation, they welcome it, because ultimately they want to make the right decision that they're going to the right team too. And so there's been a lot of decisions made about bringing someone in that has that. So great points there.
For sure. Yeah, this is really, Dave, what was the name of the book again?
Good to Great.
Oh, Good to Great, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim Collins.
Yeah.
So this is always a touchy one about having the right people on the bus, right? Because I think that particularly now we try to preserve everyone. You know, we want to keep everybody whole. We want to make it about performance and not, you know, personal and that type of thing. And I think that one of the opportunities that we have as leaders is to have that conversation early and often, because I think what happens is we don't have the conversation early and often, and we get to a point of frustration, right? And now it's just a trigger, right? You know, we're you know, fire ready aim type of thing, right? And so if we are starting early and often, maybe we can migrate that person off the bus, right? Exactly. Literally out of the company, right? Hey, this is not working out, but I'm here for you. I'll help you find that spot that works better. Yeah. And if we do that, I think we can preserve the person and the performance all at the same time.
Very well said. Yeah.
You know, when I listen to Working Genius podcast, I don't know if you guys listen to it at all. It's really cool and it applies every day. They have a story where this lady was about ready to get fired or whatever. She did Working Genius, came into her boss and said, "This is who I am." Ended up being that she got promoted. She was just in the wrong seat. Her natural skills, but she did the work of self-awareness and she knew how she was wired, and it totally flipped the script. You know, so that's a great point, Clifford, but it's really staying, get to truth. Who am I, how am I wired, and am I fit for the company? Or not, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because again, we talked a little bit about sweet spot in the title. When you're in your sweet spot or your working genius, I was doing, one talk, and there toward the end, the guy said something that was just fabulous, and I said, I'm going to have to reuse this. He said, I don't know why they call this working genius, because you're working in your genius, it doesn't feel like work. And that's really a neat thing. When he shared that with me, it's like a light bulb came off, because again, when we're in our genius, we can do this all day long. And so when people think about burnout, a lot of times they'll come home and they'll be thinking, well, I'm burned out because I'm working too many hours. Well, I love to play golf. If I was playing golf all week, I'm not going to be burned out doing that. Maybe frustrated for a few shots, but again, when we're doing things that we enjoy, well, yes, Craig's seen me play, but still, it's all about where we find our joy and fulfillment.
That's good. I like that. That's
So
really good.
So what I'd love to do, I know we have just one thing we want to touch on. I want to make sure we honor everyone's time and have enough time to kind of talk about any further Q&A. The genius of meetings. And so this is one of those things, and thinking about these different types of meetings, which geniuses are there? And so what I've seen companies do that really, really is helpful is when they're having an annual, let's say a quarterly offsite meeting, that's typically not the meeting where we need the genius of enablement or tenacity or even galvanizing. This is really that ideation. And so they call that out and they say, hey, this is a WI meeting, okay? And this WI meeting doesn't mean that others that aren't WI can't go, but it's led by that W&I, and they make sure to kind of keep it back going to that same area. Monthly solutions, or let's say a strategic meeting that you might have monthly. Now we typically get a little bit of discernment into there because we're in a frame where we want to see some discernment. Still more the ideation, but we're bringing in some discernment. When we get to the tactical or weekly staff meetings, now we're more discernment, and then we kind of get down into the enablement and tenacity. And of course, if we do any daily stand-ups or task-oriented meetings, again, that genius again gets into more of that implementation, the E's and the T's. What I see a lot of companies do, and think about this with reference to the altitude, is they try to have a meeting and people are going all over the place. And what the tendency is that if we have a genius, we're going to tend to go toward that genius unless we kind of call it out. And so what I mean by that is, I'm a W person, so I'm going to be up at 30,000 feet. If I'm in a meeting where we're talking tactics, I'm always going to try to bring that plane right back up there. And then somebody else that might be in a discernment is going to bring it to the discerning phase. So think of this plane going up and down and up and down, and before long we're all motion sick. That's what can happen in meetings, and I think they happen a lot. And so with Working Genius, just having that language to say, this is a W meeting, or this is a D meeting, or this is a T meeting, really has helped a lot of organizations when it comes to meetings.
I've seen more companies call off the letters of meetings now than I ever thought I would. You know, because especially with the visionaries, if their CEO, if it's a visionary CEO, they keep, and nothing gets done, and like, people get frustrated, like, we never get anything done in this. But when you start calling out the purpose of the meeting and have people speak up in their genius, then you get traction. You start moving.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. So back to the adoption thing, it's kind of weird. It's like, no, I need IGs to run this meeting. Really?
Yeah.
You know, it's a manufacturing shop, and they said, hey, we need to prove this. Prove what? You know, they call people out, which is really cool.
Yeah. And I've also seen if there's organizations that do more of a virtual type meeting, right there in their name, right after the name, they'll put, WD or whatever their genius is, so everybody can kind of see where their geniuses are when they're interacting virtually as well, and that can be super helpful.
The only closing comment, I don't know if it's right here or not, is the whole AI stuff, we're all dealing with AI, and we're starting to think like developers. Keep people in their sweet spot, right? If they like to code, but they hate to comment, now AI can do all the comment for them, So is it a standard? Yes. Is there version control, all that stuff? Yes. But let AI do the stuff that offsets the person's strength. Then you can have the standards. So start to think about how AI can keep people in their sweet spot, their working genius spot, because it's happening now, right? It's a plus, and it's definitely disruptive, but it's also an accelerator to people's good.
Yeah.
So keep them getting through what else. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think, Craig, you mentioned sweet spot. And again, when I think sweet spot, I think the thing that I would love for all of us to take away is Sweet Spot has all to do with self-awareness, whether it's self-awareness for yourself, self-awareness for the team. And once we have that self-awareness, and then the second component that's just as important is trust. And so thinking about, we haven't talked much about trust, but I'll kind of conclude on that, and the fact that once we know our working geniuses, and so we know where we all fit in, we still have to have that element of trust so that we can work together to actually accomplish what we need to. And a lot of times in organizations, if I look at what's the biggest thing holding the team back, it is that lack of trust. And one of the things that we think about, there's two different types of trust. There's kind of what we call vulnerability-based trust, and then there's predictive trust. Predictive trust is, hey, I know this individual, I know that they're technically savvy, and they say what they're going to do, and I know they're going to accomplish it. Vulnerability-based trust is someone really willing to be vulnerable, okay? And vulnerable meaning they're going to admit when they make a mistake. They're going to say things like, hey, that's a great idea. Tell me more about that. They're also going to say, hey, you know what? I made a mistake and I'm sorry. That vulnerability-based trust, when I see organizations start to embrace that, that's where the organization really takes off. And then they can have things like productive conflict and other things to really come together to use their geniuses to really become better. But without trust, understanding geniuses can only go so far, but trust is a big part of it.
And the umbrella around all that is that environment of psychological safety. Where you can talk about truth, you can talk about who you are, you can talk about strengths, what frustration. You get that, you got to optimize the team and optimize that, which is really good to see.
Yep. So just last thing, next steps. Individual Working Genius Assessment, anyone that's interested, they're $25 to go to workinggenius.com and you can do the assessment. Myers-Briggs, talked a little bit about that, or 16 personalities. That's a free one, and that's a really good personality-based assessment, not so much productivity, but personality. If you have a team and you're interested in actually deep diving into a Working Genius for team where it includes individual and team-based assessments, reach out to me. I can give you more information about that. Matter of fact, with this email here, if you're interested in a Working Genius assessment, the first 10 of you that reach out to me, I'll send you a free code and you guys can go ahead and do your individual assessment. So,
one thing to point out is we mentor a lot of kids, teenagers, and that's good if you have kids. Have them do the 16 personalities, because it's not the mom or dad telling them what they should be or what they think they should be. It gets them an outside, independent view. It helps them with college choices, and I've helped a lot of my daughter's friends just with college choices, career choices, and that really gets you thinking self-awareness and self-minded, so you make some decisions.
And I'll say the last thing, and this is one that I give to anyone taking an assessment. I'm guessing most of you have probably taken a lot of different assessments, especially with Working Genius. Just go into it with an open mind and really just going into it being vulnerable to say, this is who I am. There's a lot of times where when I see a person that goes through Working Genius and let's say it doesn't match exactly where they are, they were more going into it the mindset of, this is where I'm supposed to be at work and this is how I'm supposed to answer that question, rather than this is really who I am and this is what authentically brings me joy and fulfillment. So.
Doug? Oh, got a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. One thing that we've thrown around the idea, and we have different opinions in our organization about the assessment. Do you recommend reading the book before taking the assessment, or taking the assessment before reading the book?
Yeah, so what I would say is this. I don't think the order matters as long as once you do those, then you kind of put it into place. What I wouldn't do is just take the assessment, not read the book, and then try to implement it or vice versa. What I love about it is reading the book is kind of like a fable. If you read a lot of Lencioni's books, they're easy to read. It's kind of this fictional story, but it really drives those concepts home. Most people, I would say, take the assessment first and then read the book, only because I would hate to have it where you know more about it, and then you might look at this question and say, I think they're trying to lead me here, or here, here, here. So, but what I would ultimately say is both are good. Before you actually put it into place with the organization, having both of those is definitely good.
Question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's affordable, right? So you can figure out a way to expense it if you're interested in implementing it for maybe a small team or a subset of your team.
Yes.
Start with yourself, and then start with a smaller group and grow from there.
Yep. Absolutely. Start with yourself. then kind of go to the smaller group. And then again, if there's interest and you really want to dive deep into it, what I do as a certified implementer is I'll go in, run team maps, and we can talk about it. Really the magic comes is when you put it to work for the team.
And I think that's just getting that facilitated, making it work for the team. It makes sense to get some outside help for that.
It can, but again, I think there's other ways to start it. But yes, I love going in with the teams, because what you can do is, first off, you want to make sure it's not an event. Whatever we do, if we do the assessment, it's not an event that you do once and then kind of forget about. Once it becomes part of the fabric of your organization, it becomes part of your language of how you work, and then you come back to say, are we actually using that, and then challenging one another. Great stuff.
And selling the idea, let's say you love what you see and you'd like to see a team facilitation. Any thoughts on how to sell that out into your leadership team?
Yeah, usually the best thing is this assessment right here resonates extremely well with owners and CEOs, because it's, again, based more on work, not so much on personality. So I think selling it to say, hey, this is something based on the art of getting work done. Yeah. And when you talk to an owner or a CEO or someone at the executive level, getting stuff done is what they're worried about, more than what's your personality on disc or this or that. So helping the company to achieve that, to get more work done, to have employees that feel, or team members that feel empowered and excited to come to work, those are the big things that this can do, and I think that's how you can sell it out.
Yeah, I think that keyword, productivity,
Optimization, retention, which drops down to the bottom line profit. It does, so.
It's only $25, it's easy to sell.
Yes.
And if you sell one, like how we did it, start out, it's $25. I mean, they see it,
Yep.
they start getting into it, and it expands from there.
Yep.
It's nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, for sure. And again, and I think we talked a little bit about this, but using it at home too. So, having your leader take it and then have one of their family members take it, and all of a sudden they realize the power of just their home team understanding that as well is big too.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Do you gentlemen have a few extra minutes if anyone has additional questions?
Yep.
Great.
Absolutely.
We want to close up right now. I look forward to talking to each and every one of you. I'll be reaching out here in the next few weeks to chat with you. Tell your friends about this event. Whether we stick with quarterly or move to bi-monthly next year for this event is really dependent on attendance. So the more people, the better. Your work friends, your church friends, your soccer field friends who are in IT leadership, please spread the word about this meeting. So glad you're here. So glad you're interested in working on your own skills. Gentlemen, thank you so much for covering this.